I stared at the envelope for so long that the paper began to blur in front of my eyes. The letter was on the table, a plain white rectangle with the real estate company's logo in the corner. But to me, it was a time bomb that was about to blow up my whole life. Although, to be honest, there wasn't much to blow up. "Sign here, Mrs. Hutton," the young man with the folder said when he handed me the letter 2 days ago. "And here too, please." I remember signing it mechanically, not even reading the fine print. Why? I already knew what it said. The house I'd lived in for 20 years was being sold to a new owner. I was given 60 days to pack up and find a new place to live. 60 days. Almost a lifetime if you're 16, and nothing at all when you're 67. With a sigh, I opened the envelope and pulled out the letter. It was exactly as the messenger had said. Mr. Drake, my landlord, expressed regret, but offered no real alternatives. Just polite words with nothing behind them but a desire to get rid of the burdensome old tenant as soon as possible. 20 years. I've lived here 20 years. Came to this little house in the cul-de-sac of Elk Grove with Raymond when we had to sell our family home to pay off its debts after bankruptcy. Watched Raymond slowly fade away after his business fell apart. Buried him here 10 years ago. And now I was being asked to leave the only place I could still call home. Standing up from the table, I grimaced at the pain in my joints. The arthritis was progressing with each passing month, making my fingers more and more unruly and my knees less and less reliable. I reached for the phone and dialed Velma, my only friend and co-worker at the supermarket. "Oh, Bee," she said after hearing the news. "It's just awful. But you know the rental market is crazy right now? My nephew was looking for an apartment the other day, and he says prices have skyrocketed." "I know," I sighed. "I've already looked at a couple of ads online. I'm afraid my pension and cashier's salary won't even cover the cheapest apartment." "What about social housing?" Velma suggested it. "The waiting list is years long, you know that." "We'll think of something," she promised without much conviction. "Why don't we go to the viewings together at the weekend?" Over the weekend, Velma and I went to 5 different apartments. All of them were either too expensive or in a condition I didn't even want to remember. The last stop on our itinerary was a tiny semi-basement next to an industrial zone. "As you can see, it's very conveniently located," the realtor, a young woman in an impeccable suit, sang. "It's only a 7-minute walk to the bus stop." I looked at Velma and she gave me a subtle shake of her head. We both knew that 7 minutes for a healthy person meant at least 15 for me with my bad knees. "And the heating?" I asked, noticing the mold in the corner under the ceiling. "Oh, there's an electric heater in here. Very economical. That meant frozen walls in the winter and exorbitant electric bills. And with all that, the rent was almost 80% of my monthly income. When I got home, I sat in my favorite chair for a long time, staring at the wall of pictures. There weren't many, me and Raymond on our wedding day, Audrey in her graduation dress, a few old pictures of my parents. There were no pictures of grandchildren. Audrey never sent me any. Audrey. The thought of my daughter brought up mixed feelings, as always. Pride at how strong and independent she had grown up to be, and bitterness at the 19-year gap between us. 19 years had passed since the day she, 16 years old, stood before me in our old living room and told me she was pregnant, with her classmate Noah Butterfield. "We've been friends since kindergarten, Mom. We love each other," she said then, and God, what I did. I still remember my rage, shock, and disgust. Instead of supporting my daughter, I threw a tantrum, screaming that she had dishonored the family, that she had ruined her future, that I wouldn't raise her bastard. "Where you fucked, go where you fucked." Those words still burned my throat like acid. So she left, with a small backpack, head held high, not a tear shed. She went to Noah's parents, who, unlike me, had found the strength to accept the situation and support the young couple. I shuddered when the phone rang, snapping me out of my heavy memories. It was the manager of the supermarket where I worked as a cashier. Beatrice, can you take an extra shift on Wednesday? Jenny is sick and we have a delivery. I hesitated to answer. I needed the extra money, but my fingers were so swollen from yesterday's shift that I could hardly hold a cup of tea. Yeah, I guess I could do it, I said uncertainly. Great. I'll see you at 8 in the morning. As I hung up the phone, I looked at my hands. The joints were red and swollen. I knew that by the end of the extra shift, I'd barely be able to hold back tears from the pain of punching out purchases at the register. But there was no choice. I needed money for a down payment on a new place to live, if I even found one. I spent the rest of the day looking at rental ads on the internet and in newspapers. The situation looked hopeless. I even considered moving to another city where prices were lower. But what would I do there? No friends, no acquaintances, no job. At my age, finding a new job is almost impossible. The next 2 weeks were a blur. I took on any extra shifts, despite the growing pain in my hands and knees. I looked at a dozen other housing options, but all of them were either unaffordable or completely uninhabitable. Velma offered to stay with her, but her one-room apartment was too small for 2 people, and I didn't want to be a burden. As time went on, I began to panic. I was a little over a month away from eviction, and there was still no decision. On Thursday, I couldn't go to work. My arthritis had gotten so bad that I couldn't get out of bed. The manager expressed sympathy, but I could hear the frustration and irritation in her voice. They couldn't afford an unreliable employee, and I realized that the issue of my termination would soon come up. On Friday, overcome with pain, I went back to work. Standing behind the cash register, I mechanically punched my purchases, smiled at the customers, and thought about the fact that I had only one option left, an option I didn't even want to think about. I had to go to Audrey. The thought of it sent a wave of resistance, almost physical nausea through me. Pride, shame, fear of rejection. All these feelings intertwined into a tight ball lodged somewhere between my heart and throat. Over the years, I tried several times to contact my daughter. I called, I wrote letters, I even drove to Noah's parents' house once, but I didn't dare ring the doorbell. All my attempts were clumsy, full of unspoken accusations and an inability to admit my guilt fully. I said I was worried about her future, that I wanted a better life for her, but I could never just say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong." And Audrey, she built her life without me. Finished high school, then college, got a good job at an insurance company. Together with Noah, who turned out to be far more reliable and responsible than I'd expected, they'd raised 3 children, the twins Paisley and Paxton, now 18, and the youngest, Earl, who was 6. I knew this from the occasional formal greeting cards Audrey sent me at Christmas and my birthday. That evening, when I got home, I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out my cell phone. Audrey's number was written down on a piece of paper I kept in my desk drawer. I sat looking at the numbers, hesitant to press the buttons. What would I tell her? How would I explain that after so many years of estrangement, I was only reaching out to her because I needed help? Taking a deep breath, I dialed the number before I could change my mind. After a few beeps, the other end picked up. Hello? Audrey's voice sounded wary. Hello, Audrey. It's Mom. There was silence, so long that I thought I'd lost the connection. What's wrong? She finally asked coldly. I need to talk to you. It's important. I'm listening. I took a deep breath. I need your help, Audrey. The house I'm renting is being sold. I don't have the money for a new place, and with my arthritis, I won't be able to work full-time anytime soon. Yeah, I don't know what to do. There was silence again. I could almost see her tense up on the other end of the line. "And what do you want me to do?" Audrey finally asked. "I was thinking that maybe I could stay with you for a while, just for a little while, until I find another solution." I heard her exhale sharply. "Are you serious? After everything that's happened? After 19 years, you're calling me just because you don't have a place to live?" "Audrey, No," she interrupted. "You can't just show up and expect us to welcome you with open arms. I have my own life, my own family. You have nothing to do with it." Her words hit me like a slap, though I'd expected something like that. "I understand," I said quietly, "but I really have nowhere to go." And when I had nowhere to go, when you kicked me out of the house pregnant at 16, did you care? I didn't say anything. What could I say to that? She was right. "Okay," Audrey said suddenly after a pause, her voice sounding tired. "I'll discuss it with Noah. I'll call you back." And she hung up without waiting for my answer. I sat in a daze, clutching the phone in my hand. This short conversation had drained me of all my energy. Putting the phone away, I struggled to get up and wandered to the bathroom. The mirror reflected a tired old woman with bags under her eyes and deep wrinkles furrowing her once attractive face. When had I gotten so old? How was it that life had passed and I was left alone, without a home, without a family, without a future? And now I had to beg, like a beggar, for shelter from the daughter I had kicked out of the house. The circle had closed. Fate has a cruel sense of humor. The phone rang, making me wince. I hurried back into the kitchen as far as my aching knees would allow. "Hello?" It was Audrey. Her voice sounded subdued. "Noah and I talked. You can stay with us. Temporarily." I felt a lump in my throat that stopped me from speaking. "Thank you," I finally said. "Don't thank me. It was Noah's idea," she said dryly. "We have a guest room on the first floor. We expect you to abide by our rules and respect our space, and it's a temporary solution. 3 months at most, until you find a new place to live." "I understand. And another thing, I'm doing this for the kids, who have a right to know their grandmother, not for you. Just so we're clear." "Thank you, Audrey," I said again. "I really appreciate it. Move in next Saturday. You know the address." And she hung up again. I sank into the chair, feeling a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. I would have a roof over my head, but at what cost? And would I be able to endure the coldness of a daughter who made it clear she hadn't forgiven me and probably never would? Looking at my arthritic hands, I thought about what awaited me at Audrey's house, about grandchildren I hardly knew, about the son-in-law I'd never spoken to, a daughter who'd only agreed to take me in out of pity. I didn't know if I had the strength to go through with it, but there was no choice at all. Moving day came all too quickly. I'd spent the last week sorting through my belongings, packing the few things I wanted to take with me, and giving away the rest. 20 years of my life fit into 4 boxes and one old suitcase. I had long ago given Raymond's things to a charity store, leaving only his father's pocket watch and his wedding ring, which I kept in a small box. Velma insisted on driving me to her daughter's house. My old Ford had broken down long ago, and public transportation with my knees was a challenge. "Nervous?" Velma asked as we loaded my meager belongings into her car. "Terribly," I admitted, looking around the house that wasn't mine anymore. But there was no escape. The drive took about half an hour. As we got farther away from my humble neighborhood, the houses got bigger and better maintained. Finally, Velma turned onto a quiet street lined with neatly trimmed trees and stopped in front of a 2-story house with a manicured lawn. "Is this it?" she asked with ill-concealed surprise. I checked the address I'd written down from Audrey. It looked like it. We got out of the car and I felt my knees stiffen from sitting so long. Velma got my suitcase out of the trunk, and I looked around the house. It was much bigger than I'd expected, a two-story white clapboard and tile roof, with big windows and a neat porch. There was a swing set and a small children's house in the yard. Two cars, a silver sedan and a black SUV, were parked in the driveway. "Your daughter is settling in quite nicely," Velma remarked. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of pride and bitterness. Audrey had really accomplished a lot, without my help, despite everything I'd said and done. We walked slowly up the path to the porch, and I rang the doorbell with a pounding heart. A few agonizingly long seconds passed before the door opened. On the threshold stood a tall man of about 35, with blonde hair and a friendly face. I recognized him as Noah Butterfield, the boy I had once scornfully called the One, who had ruined my daughter's life. Now there stood before me a mature man with a confident look and an easy smile. "Hello, Mrs. Hutton," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome." I shook his hand awkwardly, surprised by the warmth of the greeting. "Hello, Noah. Let me help you with your things," he offered, taking the suitcase from Velma. "Thanks for giving my mother-in-law a ride." He addressed my friend with such natural politeness, as if I'd really been a part of their family all these years. "You're welcome," Velma replied. "Well, Bee, call me if you need anything." She hugged me goodbye, whispering, "Hang in there," and walked away to the car. Noah helped me up the steps and let me into the house. The inside was as neat and beautiful as the outside. The spacious hallway flowed into a bright living room with large windows. The furniture was modern but cozy, and family photos hung on the walls. My eyes lingered on a large portrait of Audrey and Noah, surrounded by their 3 children, teenage twins, and a little boy. "Audrey will be right down," Noah said, setting my suitcase at the foot of the stairs. "She's finishing up a work call. Let me show you to your room for now." He led me through the living room into a small hallway that led to the back of the house. "We've prepared a guest bedroom for you," Noah explained, opening a door at the end of the hallway. "It has its own bathroom, which should be convenient." The room was small but bright and clean, with a single bed, a chest of drawers, and a desk by the window overlooking the garden. "It's lovely, thank you," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "Make yourself comfortable," Noah smiled. "When you're ready, join us in the kitchen. I think the kids would love to meet you." When he left, I sat down gingerly on the edge of the bed, trying to control my emotions. This house, this life, it could all be a part of my life, too. I could have watched my grandchildren grow up, helped Audrey with the kids, been a real grandmother. Instead, I'm a stranger, sheltered out of pity. I slowly unpacked my things, carefully placing my clothes in the dresser and arranging a few personal items on the nightstand. A picture of Raymond, a small jewelry box, an old book of poetry. Then, taking a deep breath, I gathered my courage and left the room. Following the sounds of voices, I walked through the living room into the kitchen, a large, bright room with a large island in the middle and glass doors leading to the backyard. Behind the island sat a little boy about 6 years old, concentrating on drawing something in a sketchbook. Noah stood at the stove, stirring something in a pot. Audrey was nowhere to be seen. The boy was the first to notice me and looked up. He had bright blue eyes and wavy blonde hair, just like Noah's. "Hi," he said curiously. "Are you Grandma Beatrice?" "Yes," I answered, surprised that the child knew my name. "And you must be Earl." He nodded, setting aside his pencil. "Daddy said you're going to be living with us for a while." "If you don't mind," I said, smiling uncertainly. "I don't mind," the boy replied seriously. "All my friends have grandmothers who bake cookies and tell stories. Mine is just Grandma Lauren and Grandpa Adrian." I felt a prick of pain at the mention of Noah's parents, who obviously took the spot that was meant for me. Earl, don't harass Mrs. Hutton, Noah interjected, turning around from the stove. Have a seat, he said to me. Tea? Coffee? Tea would be lovely, thank you. I settled awkwardly in the chair next to Earl, who continued to stare at me curiously. What are you drawing? I asked, trying to make contact. Dinosaur? He answered, turning the sketchbook so I could see. It was something that looked like a crocodile and a giraffe. Very impressive, I said with genuine admiration. It's a Tyrannosaurus Rex, Earl explained seriously. It was the most fearsome predator of its time. Nothing has changed, came a cold female voice, and I looked up. Standing in the kitchen doorway was Audrey. 19 years had passed since I'd last seen her, but I'd recognize my daughter anywhere. She was slim and trim, with short brown hair styled in a businesslike style. She wore a strict pantsuit and a modest string of pearls around her neck. She looked like a successful businesswoman, which in fact she was. Hello, Audrey, I said, standing up. She nodded briefly, making no attempt to hug me or shake my hand. Make yourself comfortable, she said dryly. Noah showed you to your room? Yes, thank you. It's very nice. Good. Audrey walked over to Earl and stroked his head. How are things going at school today, kid? Fine. The boy shrugged his shoulders. Mrs. Prentice said I'm the best at math. Good for you, Audrey smiled, and I was surprised to see her face soften. She wasn't a cold businesswoman at that moment, just a loving mother. Noah put a cup of tea in front of me and sat down next to Earl. The twins will be back soon, he said, turning to Audrey. They have extra classes today. I know, she nodded and turned to me. Paisley and Paxton are getting ready for college. They have a lot of classes right now. I nodded, not knowing what to say. So many important events in my grandchildren's lives had passed me by. What college are they applying to? I asked, trying to keep the conversation going. Paisley got provisional admission to the University of California at Berkeley, and Paxton is considering several options, including Stanford, Noah said proudly. They're both honors students. That's impressive, I said sincerely. You must be very proud of them. Yes, Audrey said, and I could hear the challenge in her voice. Even though we became parents at 17, we managed to give them everything they needed. I felt myself blush. It was a direct jab in my direction, a reminder of how I'd reacted to her pregnancy, predicting disaster and ruined lives. I can see that you've done wonderfully well, I said quietly. You have a wonderful home and beautiful children. Thanks to Noah's parents, Audrey said. They supported us when my own mother threw me out on the street. There was a heavy silence in the kitchen. Earl shifted his gaze from his mother to me, clearly sensing the tension, but not understanding the reason for it. Noah coughed. I think we all need some time to get used to the new situation, he said diplomatically. Mrs. Hutton, you should probably get some rest from the road. Dinner will be in an hour. You can go back to your room if you like. I nodded gratefully, realizing he was trying to lighten the mood. I'll go get cleaned up, I said, getting up. I'm going to finish my dinosaur, Earl announced as he went back to painting. I was slowly walking down the hall toward my room when I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned around, I saw Audrey following me. We need to get something straight, she said in a quiet but firm voice as we entered the guest room. I only agreed to this for Noah and the kids, but I have conditions. I nodded silently, preparing for the worst. First, it's a temporary solution. 3 months tops, Audrey began, curling her fingers. Second, I don't want you talking to the kids about the past, about what happened between us. Especially with Earl, he's too young for that. Third, no interference in our lives, no criticism of how we raise the kids, how we run our household, nothing. I understand, I replied quietly. And another thing, Audrey added, looking me straight in the eye. Don't think this is a chance to mend the relationship. I'm doing this out of humanity, not out of love or affection. It was over between us 19 years ago when you kicked me out of the house. Her words hit me like a slap in the face, but I knew I deserved them. I'm grateful for the roof over my head, Audrey, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. And I'll abide by your rules. She nodded, clearly not wanting to continue the conversation, and walked out, closing the door tightly behind her. I sank down on the bed, feeling hot tears welling up in my eyes. But there was no time to cry, and no one to cry in front of. I took a deep breath, gathering my strength for what promised to be the most difficult period of my life. By the time I got back to the kitchen, it was bustling with activity. In addition to Noah and Earl, there were two teenagers I recognized immediately from the pictures, the twins Paisley and Paxton. Even though they were opposite sexes, the resemblance between them was striking, the same brown hair as their mothers, the same blue eyes as their fathers. "Here's our guest," Noah said when he saw me. "Children, meet your grandmother Beatrice." Paisley, a slender girl with long hair and a casual bun, gave me an appraising look, but smiled politely. "Hi," she said. "Nice to meet you." Paxton, a tall guy in a t-shirt with a band logo on it, just nodded, not really interested. "Hello," I said, feeling awkward. "I'm really glad to finally meet you." "Grandma Beatrice will be staying with us for a while," Noah explained, putting dinner on plates. "Sit down, everyone, and the food is ready." We sat around the large dining table. Audrey took the head seat, the twins sat next to her, and I was between Noah and Earl. The atmosphere was tense, especially with Audrey around, but Noah did his best to keep the conversation going, asking the kids about school and their plans for the weekend. "Paisley, tell Grandma about your biology project," he suggested, trying to engage me in the conversation. Paisley shrugged her shoulders. "Nothing much, just a study on the effects of microplastics on marine ecosystems. I won the county science fair with it." "That's wonderful," I admired her sincerely. "You must be very smart, just like your mom," Noah said proudly, smiling at Audrey. "What about you, Paxton?" I turned to my grandson. "What are you into?" "Programming," he replied succinctly. "And music." Pax created an app for tracking ecological footprints, Earl interjected, clearly proud of his older brother. "It's even in the real app store." "It's just a student project," Paxton said, embarrassed. "More than 10,000 people have downloaded it," Audrey added proudly. "Don't be modest." I looked at these talented, confident young people and marveled at how much I'd missed. Not seeing their first steps, not hearing their first words, not helping with homework, not comforting them after their first disappointments. All of that role, which should rightfully have been mine, was filled by Noah's parents, Lauren and Adrian Butterfield. "Are Grandma Lauren and Grandpa Adrian coming tomorrow?" Earl suddenly asked, as if he'd read my mind. "Yes, baby," Noah answered. "They really want to see you." "They're real grandparents," the boy said simply, looking at me. "I mean, I know you're a real grandmother too, but I've known them all my life, and I just met you now." There was an awkward silence in the room. Audrey pressed her lips together. Noah looked embarrassed, and the twins looked at each other. "It's okay," I said, trying to smile. "I understand, and I'm really glad you have loving grandparents." "Lauren and Adrian are wonderful people," Noah said, clearly trying to smooth over the awkwardness. "They helped us a lot when the twins were born. We were young, and we had two kids at once. They took me in like my own daughter," Audrey added quietly, and I heard something in her voice that I hadn't heard when she'd spoken to me, warmth and gratitude. "I don't know what we'd do without them." I felt a lump come to my throat, and I concentrated on eating to hide my emotions. Dinner continued, and the conversation moved on to other topics, but I didn't participate, immersed in my own thoughts. After dinner, I helped Noah clear the table, despite his protests over my arthritis. I wanted to show that I could be useful, that I wasn't just a burden. Don't take it personally, Noah said quietly when we were alone in the kitchen. The kids need time to get used to you. Audrey, too. I understand, I replied, and I'm grateful you let me stay here. It wasn't just my choice, he said, surprising me. Audrey could have said no, but she did. Deep down, she's still your daughter. I nodded, not trusting my voice to speak. When I finally went back to my room and got into bed, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I thought about the 19 years I had missed in the life of my daughter and her family, about how Noah's parents had taken the place that should have been mine, about how much I had lost because of my pride, my stubbornness, and my inability to admit my mistakes. There was a quiet knock on the door, and I was surprised to see Earl on the doorstep in his dinosaur pajamas. Mom said I should say good night to you, he said, like my grandmother. Thank you, Earl. I smiled, touched by the small gesture. Good night to you, too. Can I ask you a question? He asked, shifting from foot to foot. Sure. Why haven't I seen you before? I see Grandma Lauren and Grandpa Adrian every week, but I never see you. I hesitated, not knowing what to say, remembering Audrey's prohibition against talking about the past. Sometimes adults make mistakes, Earl, I said, and those mistakes can keep people apart for a long time. He nodded gravely, as if he understood more than I would have expected from a 6-year-old. Okay, good night, Grandma Beatrice. When he left, I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Grandma Beatrice. Words I should have heard years ago. The morning began with noise, children's voices, the clinking of dishes, footsteps on the stairs. After 2 decades of living alone, the din seemed almost deafening. I got out of bed slowly, wincing at the pain in my joints. A night in an unfamiliar bed hadn't been good for my arthritis. I washed my face, took my pain pills, and dressed, trying to look neat, like I was going to an important meeting and not just breakfast with my daughter's family. By the time I left the room, the house was starting to empty. Goodbye cries were coming from the hallway. Bye, Mom. Bye, Dad, Paisley shouted, slamming the door. In the kitchen, I found only Noah and Earl. Noah, dressed for work in slim pants and shirt, was packing a lunchbox for his son, and he was sitting at the table, dangling his feet and eating cereal with milk. Good morning, Noah said, noticing me. Coffee? Toast? Good morning, I replied. Just tea if that's okay. Hello, Grandma Beatrice, Earl cheerfully exclaimed, waving his spoon and splashing drops of milk. Daddy said you'd be with me today while he drove me to school and then picked me back up in the car. I looked at Noah questioningly. We thought it would be best if you stayed home today to get settled in, he explained, setting a cup of tea in front of me. Earl will be back at 3 in the afternoon, and Audrey and I are usually at work late. Paisley and Paxton will be at the school team's practice, so it'll just be you and Earl until tonight. Is that okay? Sure, I nodded, though my insides froze with the sudden responsibility. I'll keep an eye on him. Great, Noah smiled. Everything you need to know is on the refrigerator. Phone numbers, schedules, allergies, emergency contacts. Call me if you need anything. Half an hour later, I was alone in a big, empty house. It felt strange, like I was in a museum of someone else's life, where you can look but can't touch the exhibits. I walked slowly through the first-floor rooms, looking at the pictures on the walls. They depicted a happy family, Audrey and Noah with the twins at their elementary school graduation, the two of them at the beach, Earl, just born, in the arms of his proud parents, family holidays and travels. Many of the photos featured an elderly man and woman, Noah's parents, Lauren and Adrian. They were smiling, holding their grandchildren in their arms, standing next to Audrey at some formal event. I couldn't find an image of myself anywhere. By 3 o'clock, I had settled in a bit. I found cleaning supplies in the closet and dusted the living room, though the motions made my wrists ache more and more. I wanted to be useful, to show that I wasn't just a burden. At exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I heard a car pull up. A minute later, Earl burst into the house, dropped his backpack in the hallway, and immediately rushed into the kitchen, where I was preparing a snack for him, just as the instructions on the refrigerator had instructed. "Grandma Beatrice," he exclaimed, "you're still here." "Of course I am," I smiled. "I promised. How was your day at school?" "It was okay," he shrugged, settling at his desk. "We studied the planets. I said Pluto should still be a planet because it's unfair. It's so demoted. But the teacher says science isn't about fairness. It's about facts." I laughed, setting a plate of sliced apples and peanut butter in front of him. "Smart boy. You know, when I was a kid, Pluto was considered a full-fledged planet." "It was? Were the dinosaurs extinct by then?" he asked in complete seriousness. I couldn't help laughing again. "Yes, the dinosaurs were extinct long before I was born, millions of years ago." Earl nodded with relief and started eating. "Tell me about your mom," I asked, sitting down across from him. "What was she like?" Earl thought for a moment, chewing on an apple. "Mom's very smart," he said finally, "and strict. She always checks my homework and tells me to try my best, even if I don't succeed. She says that if you give up, you'll never know what you could have accomplished." In those words, I recognized Audrey, always stubborn and determined. "She loves you," I said. "I know," Earl nodded seriously. "Even when she scolds you. She says she scolds me because she loves me and wants me to grow up to be a good person." "She's right," I smiled. "What did she tell you about me?" Earl frowned, concentrating on remembering. "Not very much, just that you lived far away. And once she told Daddy that you don't know how to be a mother. I overheard when they thought I was asleep," he admitted in a whisper. I felt a lump in my throat, but I tried to smile. "Sometimes it's hard for adults to understand each other," I said finally. "And I guess I wasn't very good at being a mom to your mom." "But you can learn, right?" Earl asked with childlike candor. "Mom says it's never too late to learn." I reached out and gently shook his little hand. "Your mom is very wise." After noon, Earl invited me into his room to show me his dinosaur collection. The nursery was bright blue, with stickers of stars and planets on the ceiling and shelves filled with books and toys. "This is Tyrannosaurus. This is Triceratops. This is Velociraptor," he listed, showing me the plastic figures. "And this is my favorite, Spinosaurus." I listened attentively to his lecture about each dinosaur, their eating habits, and the causes of extinction. You could see that the boy was truly fascinated by paleontology. "You know so much," I praised him. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" "A paleontologist, like Dr. Grant from Jurassic Park," Earl answered. "Or a computer programmer, like Paxton. Or an insurance agent, like Mom." "You have time to think about it," I said. "What do your brother and sister want to be?" "Paisley wants to be an environmental scientist and save the planet," Earl said proudly. "And Pax has already gotten a scholarship for computer science. Mom says they're good, because when she was young, it was really hard for them. She studied at night when the twins were asleep." "Did she?" I asked, eagerly absorbing every bit of information about my daughter's life. "Uh-huh. Lauren's grandmother told me that Mom was very stubborn. She wanted to prove that she could succeed no matter what. And she did." Earl threw his hands up in a victory gesture. "She won her company's Regional Manager of the Year award, We have a trophy on our mantel. I remembered the metal goblet I'd seen in the living room, but I didn't pay much attention to it. It was another piece in the mosaic of my daughter's life that I hardly knew. The days were adding up into weeks. I settled into the house and my new role. By unspoken agreement, I began picking Earl up from school and spending time with him until my parents returned. I helped him with his homework, made snacks, and played board games. To my surprise, Paisley and Paxton started spending time with me too, first out of politeness, then seemingly with genuine interest. Paisley asked me to teach her how to knit, an old-fashioned hobby I'd practiced for years to soothe my aching hands. Paxton was interested in my stories about how technology has changed in my lifetime, from black and white TVs to smartphones. How did you meet your grandfather? Paisley asked one day while we were knitting on the back porch. Mom never talks about him. I hesitated, not sure how much I could tell. We met at a dance, I finally said. In those days, such events were the main way to get acquainted. Raymond was the best-looking guy in the room and a great dancer. Like in the old movies? The girl asked curiously. Yeah, about like that, I smiled. He came up, bowed, and asked me to dance, and I disappeared. Did you love each other? Paisley asked, and I could hear something like sadness in her voice. Yes, in my own way, I answered honestly. It wasn't always an easy love, though. Raymond had his faults. He wasn't very good with money, for instance, and sometimes he could be abrupt. I hesitated, not wanting to sully my husband's memory. But he loved your mom. He just didn't know how to show it. Why haven't you and Mom talked to each other all these years? Paisley suddenly asked, raising her gaze to me. I froze, remembering Audrey's strict prohibition to talk about the past. It's complicated, dear, I said carefully. Sometimes adults make mistakes that are hard to undo. I did something that really hurt your mom. Because of Pax and me? Paisley asked shrewdly. Mom says you were against it when she got pregnant at 16. I felt the color flood my face. I was wrong, I said quietly. I was scared and I behaved badly. And now I'm paying for it. Paisley nodded thoughtfully and went back to her knitting. We didn't talk about it again, but I sensed that something had changed between us, a kind of understanding. Audrey was distant, though polite. She always thanked me for my help with Earl and the chores, but she never talked about personal matters. It was like she'd built a wall between us, and I didn't know how to break it down. The tension built gradually, imperceptibly. I could feel Audrey tense every time she saw me with the children, especially Earl, who was becoming more and more attached to me, often coming to me with his little secrets and questions. You shouldn't spoil him like that, Audrey told me one day when I gave Earl an extra portion of dessert. We have rules in this house. I'm sorry, I didn't know, I replied, feeling ashamed. Now you do. She cut me off and walked away. The climax came the third week of my stay at Audrey's house. It was a Friday night, and the whole family was gathered for dinner. Lauren and Adrian, Noah's parents, were also invited. It was my first time meeting them face to face, and it was strange to finally see the people who had replaced me in the lives of my daughter and grandchildren. Lauren turned out to be a pleasant woman about my age, with gray hair gathered into a neat bundle and a warm smile. Adrian was tall, with gray in his temples, and held himself with quiet dignity. They were both polite to me, though I could sense their wariness. We're so glad to finally meet you, Lauren said, shaking my hand. Audrey has told me a lot about you. I doubted they were flattering, but I appreciated her tact. It's nice to meet you too, I said sincerely. And I wanted to thank you for what you've done for my daughter and grandchildren. Yeah, my voice trembled. I owed you a debt of gratitude. Lauren blinked in surprise, then squeezed my hand lightly. We just did what we had to do. They became our family. Over dinner, the conversation flowed easily, mostly thanks to Noah's talent for smoothing over sharp edges. Paisley talked about her plans to attend Berkeley, Paxton about her summer internship at a technology company. I'm so proud of them, Lauren said, looking lovingly at the twins. I remember when Audrey and I used to do math with them on the kitchen table, while Noah was in night classes at college. Those were crazy times, Adrian agreed. But you and Noah overcame it all, Audrey. And look at the result. He put his hand around the table. A beautiful home, wonderful children, a successful career. You proved that you were right to insist. What do you mean? I couldn't resist asking. Adrian looked at Audrey as if asking for permission. She nodded briefly, though I could see her shoulders tense. When Audrey found out she was pregnant, Adrian began, Lauren and I were shocked too. We had all sorts of options, including, he hesitated, looking at the children, including termination. But Audrey was adamant. She said she could give birth, finish school, and build a career. We had our doubts, but she proved us right. Mom always said that Pax and I were the best decision of her life, Paisley added, looking at her mother with adoration. I felt a lump come up in my throat. You've always been strong, I told Audrey, and I always knew it. It's just, I was afraid that motherhood at such a young age would ruin your future. I was wrong. There was a heavy silence in the room. Audrey's face was petrified. Don't, she said quietly but firmly. Don't pretend you believed in me. You called me a whore. You said I'd ruin my life. You kicked me out of the house when I was 16. Everyone froze. Even Earl, normally chatty, sat quietly, wide-eyed, looking back and forth at his mother and me. Audrey, maybe not now, Noah began, but she interrupted him. No, Noah, right now. Her voice was ringing with tension. I can't keep pretending everything's okay. She hasn't been interested in us for 19 years, and now that she has nowhere else to go, she suddenly becomes a loving mother and grandmother and starts telling me how to raise my kids? I wasn't trying to teach you, I countered, feeling panic rising inside me. I only wanted to help. You're not helping, you're interfering. Audrey raised her voice. You're trying to win over my children, to turn them against me. Audrey, that's not fair, Lauren intervened gently. Beatrice is really helping with Earl, and the kids have grown attached to her. Exactly. Audrey was almost screaming now. She's trying to steal my family from me, like all these years mean nothing. Audrey, please. I reached across the table to her, but she pulled away like fire. No, I can't take it anymore. I agreed to take you in, but it was a mistake. I want you to leave. Tonight. There was dead silence in the room. I could feel the blood draining from my face. Audrey, Noah exclaimed. You can't do this. Where will she go? I don't care, Audrey said, getting up from the table. Let her go wherever she wants. Like she once told me, where you fuck, go where you fuck. She's had years to mend her relationship if she really wanted to. Now she's just using us. That's not true, I whispered, feeling tears sting my eyes. Audrey, I made a terrible mistake years ago, and I regret it every day. Please. No, she shook her head. Go away. I don't want to see you again. I rose slowly, my legs barely holding me up. Without looking at anyone, I headed to my room to pack my things. Behind me, I could hear muffled voices. Noah and his parents were apparently trying to reason with Audrey, but her decision seemed to be unshakable. In my room, I sank down on my bed, unable to even cry. The irony of the situation didn't escape me. 19 years ago, I'd kicked my pregnant daughter out of the house, and now she was kicking me out. The circle had closed. With difficulty, I stood up and began putting my few belongings into my suitcase. My hands were shaking and my joints ached more than usual, but I methodically continued packing. In my mind, I went over my options. I could ask to stay with Velma, even though I knew her tiny apartment could barely accommodate her, or maybe a cheap motel until I could find something permanent. Though with my financial situation, permanent was a very relative term. There was a quiet knock on the door. I turned around, expecting to see Noah, or maybe Lauren, but there was Earl, his blue eyes full of tears. "Are you really leaving, Grandma Beatrice?" he asked in a shaky voice. I crouched down, fighting the pain in my knees to be level with him. "I'm afraid I am, sweetheart. Your mom will be better off if I leave." "But I don't want you to go," he exclaimed, throwing himself around my neck. "Who's going to tell me stories about dinosaurs? And who's going to bake cinnamon cookies on Saturdays?" I hugged him, feeling the tears finally break through. "Your grandma Lauren makes great cookies too," I said, trying to smile. "And your parents love you very much. You're going to be fine." "How about you?" he asked, pulling away and looking seriously into my eyes. "Are you going to be okay?" That kind of concern from a 6-year-old moved me to the core. "Yes, I'll be fine," I lied. Audrey appeared in the doorway at that moment. Her face was pale but determined. "Earl, go to Daddy," she said. "Grandma and I need to talk." "But Mom," the boy began. "Now," she cut him off. Earl looked at me, then at his mother, and I saw something change in his face. He straightened up and looked straight into Audrey's eyes. "Mom, you shouldn't have kicked Grandma out," he said in a suddenly firm voice. "I mean, yes, she kicked you out when you needed support. But now she needs support. Don't become like her, even though you have the right to be, if you can figure it out." I froze, struck not so much by the words as by the wisdom in the 6-year-old's voice. Audrey froze too, her eyes widening with surprise. Noah, Lauren, and Adrian appeared in the hallway, attracted by our voices. They were all looking at little Earl, who stood in front of his mother, not yielding an inch. "Earl," Audrey began in a trembling voice, "you don't understand." "No, Mom, you're the one who doesn't understand," he interrupted. "You're always telling me that you can't return evil for evil, that I should be a better person. And now you're doing to me what Grandma Beatrice did to you." The silence in the room after Earl's words rang like a taut string. Audrey stood motionless, her face pale and her eyes wide with confusion. No one dared to speak first. "Earl, come with me," Noah said quietly, coming up to his son and putting his hand on his shoulder. "Let Mom and Grandma talk." The boy reluctantly let his father lead him away, giving me one last look, a mixture of worry and childish hope that the adults would figure it out. Lauren and Adrian also tactfully withdrew, leaving Audrey and me alone. My daughter sank to the edge of the bed, staring into the space in front of her. I cautiously sat down next to her, keeping my distance. "He's right, you know," I said finally. "He's very wise for his 6 years. He's repeating what I've told him 100 times," Audrey said quietly. "I didn't think he was really listening." We were silent again. The rain began to drizzle outside the window, the drops tapping against the glass in an irregular rhythm. "I'm going to leave anyway," I said after a while. "Not because you're kicking me out, but because maybe we both need some space to think." Audrey turned to me, surprise in her eyes. "You don't have to." "I do," I interrupted softly. "I don't want to be the cause of discord in your family. You've built a beautiful life, Audrey, and I'm proud of you, though I have no right to say so." She didn't say anything, but I saw her lips quiver. "I'll call Velma," I continued, rising. "She said I could stay at her place if I needed to." "It's late now," Audrey said uncertainly. "It's okay. She'll understand." I finished packing in silence. Audrey didn't leave, but she didn't help, just sat on the edge of the bed, watching me with an unreadable expression. As I zipped up my suitcase, there was a quiet knock on the door. It was Noah. "Is everything okay?" he asked, shifting his gaze from me to Audrey. "I'm going to Velma's," I said. "Would you mind driving me?" Noah frowned. "Beatrice, you don't have to go. We can talk things over." "No, Noah." I shook my head. "I think it's best for everyone." He looked at Audrey as if expecting her to object, but she remained silent, her eyes downcast. "All right," he sighed at last. "Give me a minute, and I'll get my keys." When he left, I turned to my daughter. "Thank you for taking me in, even if only for a little while," I said. "And I'm sorry if I messed up again." Audrey looked up at me, and for a moment I thought I saw tears glistening in her eyes. "It's complicated," was all she said. I hugged the twins and Earl goodbye. The little boy clung to me tightly, not wanting to let go. "Will you come back?" he asked in a whisper. "I don't know, honey," I answered honestly, "but I'll always love you." In the car, Noah and I barely spoke for the first few minutes. He looked tired and confused, like he didn't understand how things had turned out. I noticed how tightly he gripped the steering wheel and the wrinkles around his mouth that hadn't been there 19 years ago, when he'd been just a carefree teenager in love with my daughter. "You know," he said suddenly, breaking the silence, "when Audrey told me she was pregnant, I was scared to death. I was only 16, dreaming of college, of partying, of seeing the world. All of a sudden, a baby." I turned to him, surprised by this sudden confession. "My friends told me I could just leave, that no one would judge me, that I was just a boy," he continued with a bitter smile. "But I couldn't imagine leaving Audrey. We've been friends since we were 5, you know? She's been a part of my life forever." He fell silent, focusing on the road. "I've never regretted my decision," he said after a moment. "Even when things were tough, even when I was working construction during the day, studying in the evenings, and getting up at night to see my crying twins, even when my former classmates were traveling, going to concerts, and living the life I could have had too." "You're a good man, Noah," I said quietly. "Better than I once thought you were." "It's not about my goodness," he shook his head. "It's about the fact that I loved Audrey. I still do. And our children. They're the best thing that ever happened to me. I can't imagine life without them." I felt a lump come up in my throat. This man I'd once thought was just an irresponsible boy was more mature and stronger than I'd ever imagined. "I'll talk to her," he said finally, as we pulled up to Velma's house. "She'll calm down." "There's no need to push her," I said quietly. "Maybe she's right. Maybe some things can't be fixed." Noah helped me carry my suitcase to the door. As he said goodbye, he hugged me awkwardly, and there was more warmth in that hug than in all the words we'd exchanged over the weeks. "We won't leave you," he said, "no matter what happens." I nodded, not trusting my voice to respond. Velma met me in her nightgown, with a hairnet over her head, but without a shadow of sleepiness in her eyes. It was as if she had been waiting for me, knowing that sooner or later it would end this way. "Tell me," she said, pouring me a strong cup of tea in her tiny kitchen after I'd made myself comfortable on the sofa in the living room, and I told her everything about life at Audrey's house, about the grandchildren, about the mounting tension, about the final scene with little Earl as the unexpected peacemaker. "And you just left?" Velma asked when I was done. "After the boys stood up for you?" I didn't want to cause a rift. I sighed. Audrey was right. I'd only come into their lives because I didn't have a place to live. What kind of mother does that? "The kind that has nowhere else to go." Velma shrugged. "Don't be too hard on yourself, Bee. You made a mistake 19 years ago, but Audrey's no saint. She could have reached out sooner." She didn't have to, I objected. I didn't deserve her forgiveness. It's not about merit, it's about compassion, Velma said wisely. But all right, you can stay with me for a while. We'll see. I couldn't sleep on the uncomfortable couch at night. It wasn't so much the hardness of the bed as the heavy thoughts swarming in my head. I thought about the chain of rejection that stretched through generations of our family. My own mother was a cold, demanding woman who rarely expressed love with words or hugs. I grew up trying to earn her approval and vowed to be different with my children. And yet, when the time of testing came, I behaved the same way, rejecting my daughter when she needed support the most. Now, Audrey, despite her best efforts to be a better mother than I was, repeated the same gesture of rejection in a moment of anger. And only little Earl, with his childlike wisdom, saw the pattern and named it. Could we have broken the cycle? Or was it doomed to repeat itself over and over again, passed from generation to generation like some kind of curse? With these unhappy thoughts, I finally fell into a restless sleep. The morning brought no relief. My arthritis had gotten worse after a night on someone else's couch, and I could barely move my fingers. Velma noticed my pain and silently held out a bottle of painkillers, which I took with increasing frequency. You should see a doctor, she said, watching me struggle to hold my teacup. Doctors take money, I countered. I didn't have much left. What about health insurance? It only covers basic visits, I sighed. New medications, procedures, all that stuff is expensive. Velma shook her head, but didn't insist. She understood better than anyone the limitations of our options. I spent the next few days trying to pick up the pieces of my life. I called the supermarket manager and asked to be reinstated. She wasn't thrilled. My frequent sick days before leaving were not conducive to confidence, but agreed to give me part-time, 3 times a week. I also resumed my search for a place to live, though I realized that with my budget, finding something suitable would be nearly impossible. Velma generously said I could stay with her as long as I needed, but her one-room apartment was too cramped for 2 older women. I hadn't heard from Audrey. I didn't expect her to call or write, but somewhere deep in my soul there was still hope. I missed my grandchildren, especially Earl, with his spontaneity and wise beyond his years. On the 5th day of my stay at Velma's, when I returned from another fruitless meeting with the realtor, I was in for a surprise. Sitting in the stairwell in front of the apartment were Paisley and Paxton, both with expressions of determination on their youthful faces. "What are you guys doing here?" I exclaimed, simultaneously surprised and delighted. "Does your mom know you're here?" "No," replied Paisley, rising. "We said we were going to the library to study." "Oh my God," I shook my head. "You shouldn't have lied to your mom." "Technically, it's not a lie," Paxton countered. "We're really going to the library. We just thought we'd stop by your place first." I opened the apartment door, and the twins followed me inside. Velma was gone. She'd left for her shift at the supermarket. "Tea? Cookies?" I offered, trying desperately to remember what we had left in the cupboard. "That's not why we're here," Paisley said, taking a seat on the couch. "We wanted to see how you were and to tell you what was going on at home." "It's really weird," Paxton said, sitting down next to his sister. "Mom doesn't talk much. Earl asks about you every day. Dad's trying to reconcile everyone, but it's not working out so well." "I'm sorry to hear that," I sighed, sitting down across from them. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "It's not about you." Paisley shook her head. "It's not just you. I think it's all the stuff that's been building up over the years that finally came out." "Has she always been like this?" Paxton asked suddenly. "Mom, I mean. So, restrained with her emotions until they burst out all at once?" I wondered. The image of 16-year-old Audrey came to mind, a stubborn, proud girl who would swallow her tongue rather than admit her fears or weaknesses. Yes, I said at last. She had always been strong, too strong for her own good. When she was little and fell, she never cried, just got up and walked on as if nothing had happened. She still is, Paisley said quietly. Remember, Pax, when she broke her arm helping Daddy fix the roof? She didn't even complain until Daddy noticed how weird she was holding her wrist. I shook my head, feeling both proud and hurt at the same time. Pride in my daughter's resilience and pain in realizing that perhaps this trait had developed as a defense mechanism, including from me, from my inability to provide emotional support. Tell us what it was like, Paisley asked. When Mom got pregnant, we only know her side of the story, and she doesn't like to talk about it. I took a deep breath. I didn't want to betray Audrey by telling her children something she'd rather keep hidden, but they were adults now, 18 years old, soon to be in college. They deserved to know their story. Your mother and father had been friends since childhood, I began. They lived in the same neighborhood, went to the same school. When they started dating, it was no surprise to anyone who saw them attracted to each other. But they were so young. I told them everything about how Audrey came to me with the news of her pregnancy, about my rage and fear, about how I kicked her out of the house with unforgivable words, how she left with her head held high, without shedding a tear. What about your father? I asked. Do you know what happened next? We know that he asked Mom to move in with him right away, Paxton said proudly, and that Grandma Lauren and Grandpa Adrian accepted her as their own daughter. Dad quit the soccer team to work after high school. Paisley added, he could have gotten an athletic scholarship to college, but chose to work to help Mom. Lauren's grandmother says she's never seen a 17-year-old boy be so responsible. And his friends made fun of him, Paxton continued, called him a tosser, said he was ruining his life. They'd invite him to parties, and he'd say no because he had to go to work or help his mom prepare for childbirth. I felt tears coming to my eyes. All these years, I'd pictured Noah as a frivolous boy who'd probably only stayed with Audrey out of a sense of duty. But the reality was very different. He was far more mature and responsible than many grown men, including my late husband. It was even harder after we were born, Paisley said. Dad worked during the day, studied in the evenings, and helped Mom with us at night. They were both sleep-deprived for years, but neither of them ever complained. That's why I was so angry with you, she added suddenly, looking me straight in the eye. When I found out what you'd done to Mom, all those years she and Dad fought to give us a good life, to prove that they could do it, and you didn't even give them a chance. I lowered my head, taking a well-deserved rebuke. After she left, I sat in the kitchen for hours, I admitted. I knew I'd made a terrible mistake, but my pride wouldn't let me admit it. I told myself I was doing her a favor, that being strict would make her think about the consequences, maybe even convince her to give up the baby for her own future. But she didn't, Paxton said quietly. She chose us. Yes, I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. And it was the best decision she'd ever made. Look at you, smart, beautiful, with a bright future. She was right and I was wrong. It was very hard on her, Paisley said. Grandma Lauren told me how Mom studied at night when we were already asleep, how she worked 3 part-time jobs to help with expenses, even though Grandma and Grandpa said it wasn't necessary. And Dad, Paxton added, he switched to night classes in college so he could work full-time during the day. Instead of 4 years, he studied for almost 7, but he eventually got his degree and found a good job. And she never complained, Paisley added. Even now, when we drive her crazy, she says we're the best thing that's happened in her life. That's what Daddy says, too. Paxton nodded. That he couldn't imagine life without us, that he'd never regretted his decision, even when it was hard. I felt a lump come up in my throat. How much I'd missed. How much I'd missed because of my stubbornness and pride. What a wonderful couple my daughter had raised with her seemingly frivolous boyfriend, who turned out to be more responsible than many mature men. They are amazing people, your parents, I said, much more so than I'd ever been. Paisley leaned forward and suddenly took my hand. You know what the weirdest thing is? She spent her whole life trying to prove that she can do it without you, that she's stronger, smarter, more successful, and yet she's never completely cut the ties. Those Christmas cards and birthday cards, she'd sit over them for hours, not knowing what to write. I saw her cry over one of them when she thought no one could see. Those words went straight to my heart. I'd always thought those sparse, formal cards were a tribute to politeness, nothing more. It was almost unbearable to learn that there was so much unspoken emotion behind them. We want to help you both, Paxton said, but we don't know how. Mom's stubborn, and so are you. You're so much alike, it's funny. I smiled weakly. I know. Your grandfather always said Audrey and I are two peas in a pod, not just in looks, but in personality. So, what should we do? Paisley asked. Mom won't apologize first, that's for sure. And Earl misses you. We all do, to be honest. I was touched by their words, but I understood the complexity of the situation. 19 years of resentment and estrangement couldn't be overcome in one conversation. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe we all need time, but know that I love you all, even if I don't know how to show it properly, and I'll always be here if you need me. The twins stayed for another hour. We talked about lighter things, their college plans, how Earl had recently won a high school science contest with his dinosaur project, the new app Paxton was developing. When they left, promising to visit, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and hope. Sadness at how much time had been lost, and hope that maybe not all was lost yet. In the evening, I told Velma about the twins' visit, sitting with her in the tiny kitchen over a cup of tea. They're nice kids, Velma remarked. Your daughter and her husband have raised them well. Yes, I agreed. They've been better parents than I've ever been. Don't be so hard on yourself, Bee. Velma patted my arm. You did the best you could with what you had. Raymond wasn't a model husband, as I recall. I sighed. Raymond. Audrey and I had our share of problems. He was never abusive, but his perpetual financial ventures, irresponsibility, and emotional detachment created an atmosphere of constant tension in the house. I was so busy trying to keep our family afloat that I often didn't have time for my daughter's emotional support. Still, I said, I should have been better, should have supported her when she needed me most. But you can't change the past, Velma pointed out reasonably. The question is what you're going to do now, I wondered. What could I do? Audrey had made it clear she didn't want to see me. I could write a letter, try to explain. But hadn't I tried many times over the years? And always my words sounded fake, always sounded like excuses instead of genuine remorse. I don't know, Velma, I said honestly. I just don't know. That night, lying on the couch, I thought about the twins' words, about how Audrey had spent hours sitting over Christmas cards for me, not knowing what to write, about how she cried when she thought no one could see, my strong, proud daughter who spent her whole life trying to prove to me, and perhaps to herself, that she could do it without me. And then I thought about Noah, who gave up his youthful dreams and plans for his family, who didn't run away, didn't fear the responsibility, but accepted it fully, becoming my daughter's rock when I turned my back on her. And about little Earl, his words, so simple and so poignant, don't become like her, even though you have a right to, if you think about it. In my second week at Velma's, I realized that I couldn't just sit idly by. Despite my arthritis and disability, I felt the need to be useful, to earn some money so that I wouldn't become a burden. I could only work 3 days a week as a supermarket cashier. My swollen fingers couldn't take much more, but it wasn't enough to pay for even the most modest accommodation. On Thursday, on my way home from work, I noticed an ad in the window of the Sun Valley Motel, 2 blocks from Velma's house. Janitor needed, part-time. I slowed my step, examining the peeling sign. The motel was old, a little shabby, but, judging by the number of cars in the parking lot, quite functional. Without giving myself time to think, I pushed open the office door. Behind the counter sat a full-figured woman in her 50s with a tired face and dyed red hair. "What can I do for you?" she asked without much enthusiasm. "I'm here about the ad," I said, nodding at the sheet in the window. "For a cleaning job." The woman gave me an appraising look, and I straightened up, trying to look stronger than I was. "You know it's physically demanding work, don't you?" she asked skeptically. "Cleaning rooms, changing linens, scrubbing bathrooms. There's a lot of bending over and heavy lifting." "I can handle it," I said firmly, though my insides clenched at the thought of the strain on my aching joints. "How old are you, if it's no secret?" 67, I answered, expecting that to be the end of the conversation. But she nodded in surprise. "Well, I like older workers, usually more responsible than younger people. I'm Gloria, the manager. When can you start?" That's how my new job started. Gloria offered me 2 days a week, Wednesday and Saturday, 9 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. I had to clean 6 to 10 rooms in 6 hours, depending on occupancy. The pay wasn't much, but with my part-time job at the supermarket, it was enough for a modest existence. The first day was particularly hard. Although I was used to physical labor, cleaning the rooms was a real challenge for my arthritic body. Bending over to make the beds, reaching over to wipe down the top shelves, kneeling to clean the bathrooms. Every movement was painful. By the end of my shift, I could barely stand on my feet, and my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold a mop. But I didn't complain. Gloria seemed pleased with my work, though she noticed that I moved slower than the other cleaners. "That's okay," she said as she handed me my paycheck at the end of the day. "The main thing is that it's clean, and speed will come with experience." At home, Velma shook her hands when she saw the state I was in when I came back. "You're crazy, Bee," she exclaimed as she helped me down onto the sofa. "What kind of work can you do in your condition? You can barely walk." "I need money," I said stubbornly, taking the painkiller pill from her hands. "I can't live on your couch forever." "But there are other ways. Social assistance, programs for the elderly. All of those things take time." I shook my head. "And I need a solution now. Besides," I added after a pause, "I need something to occupy my head. Otherwise, all I'll be thinking about is Audrey and the grandchildren." Velma shook her head, but didn't argue. She knew me well enough to realize the futility of it. I spent the next few days torn between my 2 jobs and finding a place to live. Visits to a realtor yielded nothing. Anything I could afford was in neighborhoods or in a condition that even my desperate situation wouldn't make me accept. I still hadn't heard from Audrey. The twins stopped by a couple more times, talking about school, about college preparations, about how much Earl missed me. But there was no talk of a possible reconciliation with my daughter. In my second week at the motel, as I was finishing cleaning the last room before I left, there was a knock at the door. Thinking it was Gloria with another errand, I shouted, "Come in," while still rubbing the bathroom mirror. "Mrs. Hutton?" I flinched when I heard a familiar male voice. Standing in the doorway of the suite was Noah, my brother-in-law, wearing a business suit and holding a folder. "Noah?" I lowered the rag, trying to hide my embarrassment. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for you," he said, walking inside. "Velma told me where to find you." "Is something wrong?" I asked, feeling my heart clench with worry. Are the children all right? They're fine, don't worry, he reassured me. I just wanted to talk. Why don't you finish up here and we can find someplace quieter? I nodded, hurriedly finishing cleaning up. Thoughts raced feverishly through my head. Why was Noah looking for me? Had Audrey changed her mind and wanted to reconcile? Or, on the contrary, had she heard about the twins' visits and was furious? When I finished my work, I took the inventory to the back room and said goodbye to Gloria. Noah was waiting for me in the parking lot, leaning against his car. Is there a cafe nearby? He asked as I approached. There's a coffee shop around the corner, I said. It's nothing fancy, but the coffee's decent. We walked in silence to the small coffee shop. Noah insisted on paying for my tea and a piece of cake, and we settled at a far table by the window, where it was relatively quiet. How are you? He asked when the waitress brought our order. Velma said you were working 2 jobs. I'm doing okay, I answered briefly, not wanting to go into details about the pain and fatigue. How are the kids? How's Earl? They're fine, Noah nodded. Earl misses you. He asks every day when you'll be back. I felt a lump come up in my throat. And Audrey? I asked cautiously. Does she know you're here? Noah hesitated, stirring his coffee with a spoon. No, he said finally. I told her I had a meeting with a client. She's having a hard time. I understand, I nodded, feeling both relieved and disappointed. I didn't want to cause trouble in your family. You didn't, Noah said firmly. There had always been trouble. It's just that you showing up opened them up like an old wound. He paused, as if searching for words. Mrs. Hutton, I wanted to talk to you about Audrey, he said at last. More specifically, about Audrey and me, our history. I think it might help you understand some things. I nodded silently, not knowing what to expect. Audrey and I have known each other since we were kids, as you know, Noah began. We grew up in the neighborhood, played together, went to the same school. When we started dating, everyone thought it was just a childhood friendship that would grow into something more. But to me, Audrey was always special to me, even as a child. He smiled, remembering. When she told me she was pregnant, I was scared, of course. I was only 16, but never, not for a second, did I ever think about leaving her. And it wasn't even about responsibility or duty. I just knew I wanted to be with her, no matter what. You were very young, I said quietly. Yes, Noah agreed. And many people said we would ruin our lives. Friends, teachers, even my parents at first. But you know what? It only made us stronger, especially Audrey. He sipped his coffee, gathering his thoughts. When you kicked her out of the house, it was like the world came crashing down. But she didn't break. She came to us, stood in front of my parents, pregnant, with a tiny backpack, and said she could handle it, that she just needed a little time to get back on her feet. I felt myself blush with embarrassment imagining the scene. My parents, Noah continued, they were shocked, of course, but they'd seen Audrey since they were kids, knew what she was like, and they accepted her, not out of pity, out of respect, because even in such a situation, she kept her dignity. I'm grateful to them, I said sincerely, for doing for her what I couldn't. Noah nodded, accepting my words. The first few years were very hard, he continued. I worked on my uncle's construction site after school and on weekends. Audrey studied until her last, gave birth to twins, and went back to school 2 months later to finish the school year. My mom helped with the kids, but Audrey insisted that she took the main care. She would get up at night to the twins, feed them, and then go to school in the morning, sleep-deprived but determined. She was always stubborn, I remarked with involuntary pride, even as a child. That's true, Noah smiled. When we left school, The guidance counselor tried to convince her to choose something easier: secretary, hairdresser, something that would allow her to start earning money quickly with 2 kids on her hands. But she was adamant. She wanted college. She wanted a career. And do you know what she told him? I shook my head. She said, "I'm going to prove them all wrong, especially my mother." Noah looked me straight in the eye. "You had been an incentive in a way. She used resentment toward you as fuel. Every time things got hard, every time she wanted to give up, she remembered your words, your rejection, and it gave her the strength to keep going, to prove to you that she could do it, that she'd be a better mother than you." I felt tears coming to my eyes. "And she succeeded," I said hoarsely. "She became a great mother, better than I ever was." "It's not about comparison, Mrs. Hutton," Noah said softly. "The point is that this resentment, it's become part of her personality. She's used it as a driving force for so long that she doesn't know how to live without it. That's why your appearance has hurt her so much. It threatens the foundation on which she's built her entire life." "I understand," I nodded, wiping away a tear. "And I don't expect forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it." "It's not about merit," Noah said, and his words echoed Velma's. "The point is that it's not just you who needs forgiveness, it's her too, to move on." He was silent for a moment, giving me time to consider his words. Earl's words. They really hurt her, he continued in a quieter voice. "When he said she was becoming like you, it was like a punch in the gut. That's what she's been afraid of all her life, to repeat your mistakes, to become like you." "She's not like that," I said firmly. "She's so much better." "Maybe," Noah nodded, "but the fear remains, and now that she's kicked you out, she sees the resemblance even more clearly, and she hates herself for it." We sat in silence, finishing our cooled tea and coffee. It was beginning to get dark outside the window, the early twilight coloring the street blue. "I want you to know," Noah finally said, "that despite all of this, I'm grateful to you." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "Me? For what?" "For Audrey," he said simply. "For who she is, strong, independent, stubborn. For being such a great mother to our children. She's always had it all, but, maybe it's the hardships she's been through that helped those qualities to emerge." "You don't have to thank me." I shook my head. "What I did was unforgivable." "Nothing is unforgivable if you're willing to forgive," Noah said softly. "Just give her time." He pulled an envelope from his inside jacket pocket and placed it on the table. "What's this?" I asked without touching it. "Information about the Maple Grove nursing home," Noah said. "It's a partially subsidized government facility for low-income seniors. They have a space opening up next month. I talked to the director, and she said that with your income level, you qualify for a substantial discount." I stared at the envelope in silence with mixed feelings. On the one hand, it was a solution to my housing problem. On the other hand, it was an admission that I was really old and infirm, unable to take care of myself. "Thank you," I finally said, taking the envelope. "Yeah, think about it. They do tours on Wednesdays," Noah added, getting up. "If you'd like, I could take you there next week." "That's very kind of you," I said, standing up too. "But I don't want to burden you. I'll ask Velma." We left the cafe and Noah offered me a ride to Velma's house. We were silent in the car, each absorbed in our own thoughts. When we got to her house, I turned to Noah. "Can I ask you a favor?" "Sure," he nodded. "Tell Earl I miss him, and the others too. If possible, give him this." I pulled a small package out of my bag, a book about dinosaurs that I'd bought with my last paycheck at a used bookstore. Noah took it, smiling slightly. "I'll be sure to pass it along. He'll love it." We said goodbye, and I watched his car drive away, feeling strangely calm. Our conversation hadn't solved our problems or brought about a miraculous reconciliation, but somehow my heart felt lighter. Maybe it was because I saw Audrey through the eyes of the man who had loved her all these years, despite the difficulties. At home, I told Velma about meeting Noah and showed her information about the nursing home. Maple Grove? Velma shook her head thoughtfully. My cousin lives there. She says it's not bad. It's clean. The staff is attentive. There's a library and a knitting club. But B, are you sure? I mean, it's, you know. A nursing home, I finished for her. Yeah, I know. But what are my options? I can't stay with you forever, and I don't have enough money for a place of my own. Plus, with my arthritis, it's getting harder and harder for me to manage on my own. You can always stay with me, Velma objected, but we both knew that wasn't a solution. I'll take a tour on Wednesday, I decided. I'll see what this place is like. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night, thinking about the conversation with Noah, about how Audrey had used her resentment of me as an incentive, as a driving force for her accomplishments, about how she was afraid to repeat my mistakes and how she ended up making the same one, rejecting a loved one in their moment of need. Was this some sort of generational curse passed down from generation to generation? My mother was also a cold, reserved woman who rarely expressed love and easily dispensed criticism. I vowed to be different with Audrey, but at a crucial moment I behaved exactly the same way. Now Audrey, despite her best efforts to be a better mother, has also repeated this gesture of rejection. The circle must be broken, I thought, and maybe I would be the one to take the first step. With that thought, I finally fell asleep, holding in my mind the image of little Earl telling his mother, with such unchildlike understanding, not to repeat his grandmother's mistake. On Wednesday, I took the day off from the motel and went on a field trip to Maple Grove. Velma insisted on accompanying me, and I was grateful for her support. The nursing home was better than I expected. A bright three-story building surrounded by a well-kept garden with spacious common areas and small but cozy rooms for the residents. The director, a friendly middle-aged woman, showed us all the amenities: a dining room, a library, a recreation room with a TV and board games. The residents seemed happy, and many greeted us with smiles. We have a room available next month, the director said as we finished our tour. Given your situation and income level, you are eligible for a significant discount. Here's all the paperwork you'll need to fill out if you decide to join us. She handed me a folder of papers, and I mechanically took it, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. On the one hand, it solved my housing problems and offered some stability. On the other, it felt like a final acknowledgement that my time of independence had come to an end. Think about it, the principal said softly, noticing my hesitation. It's a big decision, but know that you are welcome here. On the way home, Velma tried to cheer me up by telling me how her cousin had made new friends at the nursing home, how she participated in activities, how she felt safe knowing that medical help was always close by. This isn't the end of life, Bee, she said as we approached her home. More like a new chapter. I nodded, though in the back of my mind I still doubted it. But when my joints ached again that evening and my fingers refused to hold even a light cup, I realized that I didn't really have a choice. I couldn't keep working two jobs. My body just couldn't take it. And without a job, I couldn't afford my own place. With a heavy heart, I began filling out the paperwork to enroll at Maple Grove. It was a rational decision, the right decision, but it still felt like defeat. On Saturday, when I returned home from my shift at the motel, Velma greeted me with unusual excitement. You got a call, she said as soon as I crossed the threshold. From Maple Grove. They said they'd reviewed your application and approved it. You can move in the first day of next month. That fast? I was surprised. I thought it would take longer. It looks like you have some powerful friends, Velma said mysteriously. The director had mentioned that one Noah Butterfield had highly recommended speeding up the process. Sounds like your brother-in-law cares a lot about you. I sank down on the couch, trying to make sense of the news. Noah hadn't just given me information about the nursing home. He was actively helping me get there. Why? Out of the goodness of his heart? Or was it a way to assuage his conscience about his wife kicking me out of the house? But I knew Noah enough to know that he wasn't a man acting out of guilt or obligation. If he helped me, then he genuinely wanted me to have a roof over my head and the care I needed. That night, I wrote him a short thank you note, not asking why he had helped, just expressing my appreciation. I wasn't sure how to deliver it. I didn't want to cause problems between him and Audrey, but I decided I would pass it on through the twins the next time they visited me. The thought of moving into a nursing home in 2 weeks had mixed feelings. It was the end of a certain phase of my life, an acknowledgement of my vulnerability and dependency. But maybe it was also the beginning of something new, a chance to find peace and acceptance, not just from those around me, but from myself. I spent the last few days before moving to Maple Grove sorting through my few belongings. It's amazing how few things truly matter when you have to move into a tiny room in a nursing home. Clothes, a few books, photos, and a box of memorabilia were all that was left of 67 years of life. Velma helped me pack, trying to keep my spirits up. "Look how comfortable this blue blouse is. It doesn't wrinkle at all," she said, folding my things neatly into my suitcase. "And take these shoes too. They have a sturdy heel, good for your knees." I nodded silently, letting her talk. Her chatter distracted me from my heavy thoughts and the feeling that I was preparing for the last move of my life. I had already quit my job at the supermarket and motel, explaining that I was leaving for health reasons. Gloria, the motel manager, seemed genuinely distressed. "You've been a good worker, Mrs. Hutton," she said as she handed me my last paycheck. "Thorough. There aren't many of those nowadays." It was a small but sincere praise, and I felt a strange satisfaction. At least I was good at something, even something as simple as cleaning motel rooms. The day before the move, I sat in Velma's tiny living room going through old photos, deciding which ones to take with me and which ones to keep. A photo of Raymond on our wedding day, young, smiling, full of hopes that were not destined to come true. Audrey in her graduation dress, serious and even then determined. A few snapshots of my parents, who are long gone. I was almost done when the doorbell rang. Velma was at work, so I got up from the couch with a grunt and went to open it, assuming it was the delivery guy or a neighbor. Audrey stood on the doorstep. I froze, not believing my eyes. My daughter looked tired, with shadows under her eyes and a tense expression on her face. "Hello, Mom," she said in a neutral tone. "May I come in?" "Sure." I stepped aside, letting her inside. "Sorry about the mess. I'm getting ready to move." "I know," Audrey nodded, looking around. "Noah said he helped you with the nursing home registration, so that's how she got my address." I felt slightly disappointed. For a moment, I thought the twins might have told her about their visits to me, but apparently they were still keeping it a secret. "Yes, I'm moving in tomorrow," I said, pointing to the couch. "Have a seat, please. I can offer tea." "No need." Audrey shook her head, but sat down. "I won't be long." I sank into the chair across from her, my heart pounding. It was the first time I'd seen my daughter in 3 weeks, and I didn't know what to expect from this visit. "How are the children?" I asked, breaking the awkward silence. "They're fine," Audrey answered briefly. "Earl was very excited about the dinosaur book. Thanks." "You're welcome," I smiled, imagining the little boy's delight. I thought of him. There was silence again. Audrey wasn't looking at me, but away from me, at the wall of pictures of Velma and her family. Why are you here, Audrey? I finally asked bluntly. You didn't have to. She took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength. Noah said I had to talk to you before you move in, that I needed to close this chapter. She said it like she was performing an unpleasant but necessary duty. I felt something clench inside. I understand, I nodded. But you really don't have to. I don't expect you to forgive me or. It's not about forgiveness, Audrey interrupted, looking me straight in the eye for the first time. It's about understanding and moving on. I waited silently for what she had to say next. You know, I've been mad at you my whole life, Audrey began after a pause, for kicking me out when I needed you the most, for not believing in me and Noah, for not being there for me when the twins were born, when they took their first steps, spoke their first words, for missing all the important moments of my life. Her words were like knife stabs, but I took them, realizing I deserved each one. But then I realized something, Audrey continued. I realized that this anger, it was a part of me. It was what drove me forward all those years. Every time I had a hard time, every time I wanted to give up, I remembered you, your words that I couldn't do it anyway, and it gave me the strength to keep going, to prove you wrong. Noah told me, I said quietly, about how you used your resentment toward me as motivation. Audrey raised her eyebrows in slight surprise. You and Noah had discussed me? Only in the context of how I can better understand you, I hastened to clarify. He loves you very much, Audrey, and he's always believed in you. I know, she nodded, and her face softened for a moment. I'm lucky to have him. We were silent again. Somewhere in the apartment, a clock ticked, counting down the seconds of this strange, tense conversation. When you showed up on our doorstep, Audrey said again, I felt, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know how to describe it. Like everything I'd built, everything I'd accomplished, was suddenly threatened. Like your presence could destroy it all. I never wanted. It's not about what you wanted, she interrupted. It's about how I felt. It's that I was afraid. Afraid that letting you back into my life would somehow devalue everything I'd been through. That it would mean that all those years of resentment and anger had been for nothing. I tried to understand her logic, to see things through her eyes, and I think I was starting to make sense. And when Earl said those words, Audrey continued, her voice shaking, when he compared me to you, it was like a punch to the gut, because I've spent my whole life trying to be different than you, to be a better mother, more understanding, more supportive, and to suddenly hear from my own child that I'm repeating your mistakes. He's just a little boy, I said softly. He didn't understand. No, he understood too well. Audrey shook her head. Children in general see more than we realize, and he was right. I did follow your pattern, rejecting someone close to me when they needed help. I didn't know how to respond to such candor. Part of me wanted to reach out, to hug my daughter, to tell her everything would be okay. But I knew that wouldn't be true. Some wounds are too deep to be healed with one conversation or hug. I'm sorry, Audrey, I said finally. I'm sorry I wasn't the mother you needed. I wish I had supported you when you needed it most. I wish I had missed so many important moments in your life. I'm sorry too, she replied quietly. I wish I'd found the strength to forgive you sooner, that I'd held on to that resentment for so long that it had become a part of me. You had a right to do that, I said. Maybe, Audrey shrugged, but it didn't make me any happier. We sat staring at each other across the gap of 19 years of estrangement, and I saw in her eyes a reflection of my own pain and regret. When you took me into your home, I dared to ask, was it only because of Noah? Or did you do it to prove to yourself that you were not like me? Audrey was silent for a long time, and I thought she would not answer. But finally she spoke up. I don't know, probably both. Noah insisted. It's true. But I could have said no. I almost did. And then I thought, what if I do to you what you did to me? How am I any better? So, yes, maybe it was a kind of proof to myself, not to you, that I could be better, stronger, kinder. Her honesty hurt, but I appreciated it. Thank you for being honest, I said. Audrey nodded, rubbing the strap of her purse. I don't think we can ever be really close, she said after a pause. Too much time has passed, too many resentments have built up, but I don't want to be angry with you anymore. It's, it's too exhausting and pointless. I understand, I nodded, feeling the lump in my throat. And I don't ask for more than that. Just knowing that you're okay, is enough. I'm fine, Audrey said. We're doing fine. The twins are going to college in the fall. Paisley to Berkeley, Paxton probably to Stanford. Earl, he misses you. He's been asking where you went. What did you tell him? I asked him with a little trepidation. The truth, that you're moving to a place where you'll be taken care of because you're having a hard time on your own. Audrey smiled weakly. He said he wanted to visit you. I felt my heart skip a beat. Did he? Yeah, and I don't mind. Noah could bring him by sometime, and the twins too, until they go off to college. I couldn't believe my ears. This was more than I dared to hope for. Thank you, I whispered, not trusting my voice. Don't thank me. Audrey shook her head. It's not for you. It's for them. They have a right to know their grandmother. I nodded, accepting that truth as well. Can I ask you something? Audrey said out of the blue. Sure. Why did you react like that the other day? When I told you I was pregnant? Was it because of what people would say? Was it because you thought I was too young? Or were you just disappointed in me? The question caught me off guard, and I thought about it, trying to answer it honestly. All of them, I guess, I said finally. I was afraid for you, afraid that your life would be ruined, that you'd never get an education, never build a career, that Noah would leave you once he realized how serious it was. And yes, I was ashamed of what my neighbors would think, my coworkers, and I was furious that all the plans I'd made for you were falling apart before my eyes. But you never asked what I wanted, Audrey said quietly. What my plans were. No, I agreed. I didn't. I thought I knew better, that as a mother I had the right to decide for you. I was wrong. And now you're sorry? She asked, looking me straight in the eye. I was silent for a long time, pondering the answer, not the one she wanted to hear, but the one that was true. I'm sorry I hurt you, I said finally. I'm sorry for kicking you out of the house instead of supporting you. I'm sorry for the words I said then, but I can't say I'm sorry for what happened afterward. Look at who you've become, what a family you've built, how much you've accomplished. Maybe, maybe if I'd stood by you, things would have turned out differently. Maybe you wouldn't have become so strong, so independent. I don't know. Audrey looked at me for a long time, and I couldn't read the expression on her face. You know, she said at last, I've often thought the same thing, that if you had supported me, if you had helped me, things might have been different. But I can't imagine my life without everything I've been through, without the struggles that made me who I am. So maybe you're right. Maybe everything happened the way it was supposed to happen. It wasn't forgiveness, but something very close to it. A recognition that sometimes even the most painful events can make something good come out of them. It was more than I dared hope for. Audrey looked at her watch and stood up. I have to go, she said. I have to pick Earl up from school. I got up too, feeling my knees ache from sitting so long. Thanks for coming, I said sincerely. Audrey nodded, heading for the door. At the threshold, she stopped and turned around. Good luck with the move, she said. Noah can help if you need it. Thanks, but Velma's already volunteered, I replied. And there's not much stuff in there. Audrey nodded again, already grabbing the doorknob. Mom, she said suddenly, and I froze at the new intonation in that simple word. I don't forgive you, not yet, but I'm not angry anymore. And that's something, isn't it? Really, I agreed, feeling tears come to my eyes. That's a lot. She smiled weakly and walked out, closing the door quietly behind her. I was left standing in the middle of the small living room, feeling strangely empty and relieved at the same time. It was as if the weight I'd been carrying on my shoulders for years had lessened a little. In the evening, I told Velma about Audrey's visit. My friend listened attentively, not interrupting, only occasionally nodding in understanding. What do you think? I asked, finishing my story. Is there any chance that she and I will ever really make up? Velma hesitated, stirring her tea. I don't know, Bee, she said honestly. 19 years is a very long time to hold a grudge, but the fact that she's come to talk, that she'll let the kids visit you, that's a good sign. Maybe not a full reconciliation, but a truce of sorts? I guess, I nodded. And, that's enough for me. Just knowing that she's okay, that she's doing well, and to see the grandkids once in a while. I don't deserve any more than that. Don't say that, Velma frowned. Everyone deserves a second chance. Maybe, I smiled. But sometimes second chances don't look the way we expect them to. The next day, Velma helped me move into Maple Grove. The director met me personally, showed me my room, small but bright, with a window overlooking the garden, and introduced me to the staff. Everyone was polite and attentive, and I felt that I could get used to this place, that it could become, if not a home, at least a safe harbor for my remaining years. After Velma left, promising to visit me every week, I began to organize my few belongings. On the nightstand by the bed, I put pictures, Raymond, a young Audrey, and the new one the twins had recently brought the whole family together, including little Earl with his unchanging smile. It was the first family picture I'd had in years. When I was almost done unpacking, there was a knock on the door. A nurse stood on the doorstep. Mrs. Hutton, you have visitors, she said with a smile. I'll show them to the restroom if you're ready. I blinked in surprise. Who would come to see me on my first day? Maybe Velma had forgotten something? In the break room, Paisley and Paxton were waiting for me. They were sitting on the couch, talking quietly, but when they saw me, they both stood up. Grandma, Paisley exclaimed, coming toward me. We thought we'd help you get settled in. We brought cookies, Paxton added, pointing to a box on the table, and books. We thought you might be bored at first. I was touched by their concern. Thanks, guys, I said, taking a seat in the chair. How did you know I was moving in today? Mom told me, Paisley answered, and I froze. Mom? She knows you're here? Of course, Paxton nodded. She even offered to give us a ride, but we had our own things to do in this part of town. I couldn't believe my ears. Not only did Audrey know about the twins' visit, but she approved of it. After our conversation yesterday, I expected her to let the kids visit me, but I didn't think it would be so soon. Did she talk to you about me? I asked cautiously. The twins looked at each other. Yes, Paisley said. She said that you two had talked and that she didn't mind us hanging out with you anymore. She even said she might bring Earl back next week. Paxton added, If you don't mind, of course. Of course I don't mind, I said hastily. I'd be very happy to. We spent almost 2 hours with the twins. They talked about their college plans, about their summer vacation before they left, about how Earl was starting to miss them even though they hadn't even left yet. I listened, asked questions, laughed at their jokes, and gradually the weight on my heart became lighter and lighter. When they were leaving, Paisley suddenly hugged me, the first time I'd hugged her since we'd met. It was unexpected and very touching. Paxton, more reserved, just shook my hand, but I could see the warmth in his eyes. "We'll come visit you," Paisley promised. "Even when we go away to college, we'll come back during the vacations." "Thank you, honey," I said, afraid I was going to cry in front of them. "It means a lot to me." When they left, I went back to my room and sat by the window, looking out at the garden, where the elderly inhabitants of the house were strolling leisurely along the paths. My thoughts returned to my conversation with Audrey. She hadn't forgiven me. Perhaps she would never fully forgive me, and I couldn't blame her for that. Some wounds are too deep to ever fully heal. But she wasn't angry anymore, and that was the beginning of something, if not new, at least less painful. I didn't know how often I would see my daughter in the future. Perhaps only a glimpse when she would bring Earl around. Or maybe she wouldn't visit at all, but would send him with Noah. And that would be fine. I wasn't expecting more than that. But my grandchildren, these amazing young people I hardly knew until recently, wanted to be a part of my life. And through them, maybe the connection to Audrey, thin and fragile but still real, would remain. I pulled a quadruple-folded piece of paper out of my pocket, a card Audrey had sent me last Christmas. It had a picture of a winter landscape on it, and inside was simply signed, "Merry Christmas, Audrey and Family." No warm words, no personal message. But now, after our conversation, I knew that behind that simple signature were hours of doubt, unspoken emotions, maybe even tears. And that thought warmed me as I sat in my new room, listening to the quiet sounds of the nursing home, preparing for a new chapter of my life, a chapter that might have less loneliness than I expected,